Listen. Come closer. No, don't turn on that lamp. The dark is better for this kind of story. It holds secrets better than the light does. You have to understand, I didn't ask for any of this. I just needed a job, and the Sleepy Hollow Motor Inn needed a man to watch the desk from midnight to dawn. It's a job for ghosts and insomniacs, and I was a little of both. The first time it happened, I thought it was just a bad trip, but then I realized I was the only one not taking anything. It was a Tuesday, the air thick with the promise of a summer storm that never broke. The motel is a sad, U-shaped affair off a highway nobody uses anymore. My little office sits at the bottom of the U, a glass box where I watch the cracked asphalt and the 10 identical doors. That night, room 13 was occupied by a couple from Ohio, the Millers. They were celebrating an anniversary, trying to recapture something they'd lost somewhere between mortgages and children. I gave them the key, a real key, brass and heavy, and went back to my crossword. Around 3 a.m., the phone buzzed like a trapped fly. It was Mr. Miller, his voice a ragged whisper. You need to come. My wife, she's... He didn't finish. I grabbed the master key and jogged over, my footsteps echoing in the humid silence. The door to room 13 was ajar. Inside, the air was cold, unnaturally so, smelling of stale cigarette smoke and something else, something like rain on hot asphalt. Mrs. Miller was sitting bolt upright in the rumpled bed, her face pale as bone in the dim light from the bathroom. She was staring at her own hands as if they belonged to someone else. She woke up screaming, Mr. Miller said, pulling at his hair. Just screaming. I knelt by the bed. Ma'am, are you all right? She looked at me, but her eyes were focused somewhere far away. The locket, she whispered, her voice trembling. It was cold, so cold against my skin. She touched her throat. He shouldn't have done it, he promised. Her words were clear, but they were coated in a thick, syrupy confusion. She was perfectly lucid, yet completely lost. What locket? Her husband asked, his face a mask of bewilderment. Honey, you don't own a locket. She shook her head, a single tear tracing a path through her foundation. No, not mine. Hers. I felt it all. The click of the clasp, the weight of it, the way the chain caught on my hair. She started to sob then, a deep, rattling sound of pure, undiluted grief. She wasn't just sad. She was mourning someone she'd never met. I got them a room on the other side of the courtyard. Room 4. They left before sunrise, leaving a wad of cash on the nightstand in room 13, as if they were paying for an exorcism, not a night's stay. When my boss, Silas, shuffled in at 6 a.m., I told him what happened. Silas is a man made of cigarette smoke and disappointment, with eyes that have seen too many dawns from the wrong side of a bottle. He just polished the front desk with a greasy rag. People have nightmares, Leo, he grunted. This wasn't a nightmare, Silas. This was a memory. She was remembering something that never happened to her. She described a gold locket, the feel of it, the smell of the rain. He stopped polishing. He didn't look at me. He looked at the security monitor, the one that showed a grainy, black and white feed of the courtyard. We should check the tapes for room 13, I pushed. Maybe someone went in there. Maybe there was a gas leak. Silas turned to me, his face grim. The friendly, weary facade was gone. The tapes are for theft, son, not for feelings. He leaned in. his voice dropping to a low, serious rumble that smelled of stale coffee. "You don't want to know what's on those tapes. You just put fresh sheets on the bed, you hear me? You put fresh sheets on the bed and you forget it." I wanted to argue, but the look in his eyes stopped me cold. It wasn't anger. It was fear. A deep, settled fear, like a stone at the bottom of a well. He knew what was happening in that room. He knew, and he was choosing to ignore it. And as I walked out into the pale morning light, the only question in my head was why? Why would a man be so afraid of a bad dream? The weeks that followed were quiet. But the quiet was different now. It was heavier. I'd find myself staring at the door to room 13, half expecting it to swing open. I started noticing things. The light above that specific door flickered in a strange, rhythmic pattern, like a slow heartbeat. 1, 2, pause. 1, 2, pause. No other light on the property did that. I tried to convince myself it was faulty wiring, but the thought wouldn't stick. The air around that end of the motel just felt thin, colder. Then came the trucker, a big guy named Hank, with a beard like a crow's nest and hands calloused from 1,000 gear shifts. He just wanted a few hours of shut-eye before hitting the road again. All the other rooms were taken by a high school sports team. The only one left was 13. I hesitated. I almost told him we were full. What would you have done? Turned away business because of a weird feeling? I handed him the key. My hand was shaking. He was back at the desk in less than an hour. He wasn't screaming like Mrs. Miller. He was worse. He was utterly still, his face the color of spoiled milk. He sat down heavily in the lobby chair, the springs groaning in protest. "I need to tell you something," he said, his voice a low, gravelly rumble. He didn't look at me. He stared out at the empty parking lot, at the silent, watching door of room 13. I fell asleep fast, real fast, and I dreamed. He took a shaky breath. I was sitting in a car, not my rig, a sedan, an old one. It was raining. I could hear the drops hitting the roof. A real soft thump, thump, thump. I could smell wet wool, like a damp coat, and I was waiting for someone. My blood ran cold. The rain. Mrs. Miller had mentioned the smell of rain on asphalt. My hands, Hank continued, holding them up. They were huge, scarred things, but in his mind, they were different. They were small, slender, rings on the fingers. I had a purse on my lap, faux leather. I could feel the cheap grain of it under my fingertips. He swallowed hard, and I was scared. No, not scared, resigned. I knew he was coming, and I knew what he was going to do. He finally looked at me, his eyes wide with a terror that didn't belong to him. Then I felt it, a coldness spreading up my arm, a tingling in my lips. My heart, it started doing this real slow, heavy beat. Thump, thump. It was like the engine was shutting down. I couldn't breathe. I was looking out the windshield at the rain, and I was just stopping. He stood up, his whole body trembling. I've been in bar fights, rolled a rig in a snowstorm. I ain't never been scared like that. That wasn't my death I just felt. It was someone else's. He threw the key on the counter. It skittered across the formica with a noise like a scream. You got a goddamn ghost in that room. You walked out without another word, leaving the door to swing shut behind him, the little bell above it giving a final, mournful jingle. After he left, the silence was deafening. It wasn't just a room with bad dreams anymore. It was a room with a memory, a single, looping terrible memory of someone's last moments on Earth, and every guest who stayed there was forced to live it with her. I went straight to Silas's little back office. The VCR for the security system sat on a dusty shelf, a silent black box. The tapes were stacked neatly beside it, labeled by date. I knew the tape for the night the Millers stayed was in there. I knew the tape from tonight was recording right now, showing Hank's truck sitting peacefully in the lot while he was inside, dying with a ghost. I had to see it. I had to know what the camera saw. But the office was locked. When Silas came in the next morning, I confronted him again, my voice shaking with a mixture of fear and anger. A trucker left last night, Silas. He had the same dream. The rain, the car, the fear. He felt himself dying. Silas just sighed, a long, weary exhalation of smoke. He wouldn't meet my eyes. He just stared at the brass key for room 13, which he kept on a separate hook behind the counter. He took it down and with a soft cloth began to polish it, a ritual I'd seen him do 100 times, but never understood. "Let sleeping dogs lie, Leo," he whispered. "Someone died in that room, didn't they?" I pressed. "That's what this is. We have to call someone, the police." He laughed, a dry, bitter bark. "Call them and say what? That my motel gives people bad dreams? They'd lock me up. They'd lock you up." He hung the polished key back on its hook. It gleamed under the fluorescent lights, impossibly bright. "Just do your job. Rent the rooms, all of them, and leave room 13 alone." But that was the problem. I couldn't leave it alone. It was like a loose tooth. I had to keep worrying it. That night, a young woman checked in. A student, I think. Her car loaded with books and clothes. Her name was Chloe. She was tired, on a long drive, and just wanted the cheapest room. My heart sank into my stomach. The cheapest room. The one with the flickering light. The one with the cold air. I gave her the key to room 7. She smiled politely. "Actually, I saw the one at the end, number 13. It's a little more private. Could I have that one instead?" Every instinct in my body screamed no. But what could I say? I couldn't tell her the truth. She'd think I was a lunatic. So I did the only thing I could. I swapped the keys. I smiled a smile that felt like cracking glass, and I watched her walk towards that door, a lamb to the slaughter, while I stood there, her silent, unwilling executioner. The hours after Chloe checked into room 13 were the longest of my life. I couldn't sit still. I paced the small office, the linoleum worn smooth in a track from my boots. Every creak of the building, every rumble of a truck on the distant highway made me jump. I kept my eyes glued to the security monitor, the grainy black and white feed of her door. It just sat there, closed, silent. The light above it pulsed. Thump, thump, pause. Thump, thump, pause. I made a pot of coffee that tasted like battery acid and regret. I told myself I was being ridiculous. It was just a series of strange coincidences. A suggestible woman, a stressed-out trucker, that's all. Chloe would sleep like a baby and check out in the morning, wondering why the night clerk looked like he'd seen a ghost. The phone rang at 2:17 a.m. The sound ripped through the silence, and I swear my heart stopped for a second. The caller ID just showed the room number. 13. I snatched it up. Front desk. It wasn't a scream. It was a choked sob. Please, can you come? I think there's someone else in my room. My blood turned to ice. I'm on my way. Lock your door. A stupid thing to say. My brain wasn't working. He's not here, she cried, her voice cracking. He's in my head. I was at her door in seconds, the master key shaking in my hand. I knocked first. Chloe, it's Leo from the front desk. The door flew open. She stood there, wrapped in a thin motel blanket, her face a mess of tears and terror. But it was her eyes that got me. They were filled with a cold, hard fury that didn't belong on her young face. It was ancient and venomous. He said he loved me, she hissed. The words not quite her own. The cadence was wrong, the accent subtly different. He put it in my drink. The liar. The smell. Bitter almonds. He watched me drink it, and he smiled. My stomach lurched. The missing pieces were slotting into place. The car. The rain. The waiting. It wasn't suicide. It was murder. Chloe stumbled back into the room, clutching her head. Get him out of my head. I can feel his hands. His rough coat. He's talking to me. She collapsed onto the bed, sobbing. Make it stop. I got her out of there, took her to the office, and gave her a bottle of water. I watched her from the corner of my eye as she called a friend to come pick her up, her voice a tiny, frightened whisper. While she was on the phone, I made a decision. I couldn't let this go on. I was complicit. Another person scarred by this place, by that room, because I was too scared to do anything. Silas kept a spare set of keys to the office in the fuse box out back. I knew because I'd seen him go there once during a power outage. After Chloe's friend screeched out of the parking lot, I grabbed a flashlight and went. My hands were slick with sweat as I opened the metal box. There they were, jangling softly. The back office was dark and smelled of dust and old paper. The VCR sat on its shelf like a malevolent idol. I found the tape from the night the Millers stayed. My heart hammered against my ribs as I slid the cassette into the machine. I hit play. The screen flickered to life, showing the familiar, static-laced view of the courtyard outside room 13. I fast-forwarded through hours of grainy nothingness. Then, I saw my own fuzzy shape jogging towards the door. I saw Mr. Miller let me in. The camera couldn't see inside, of course. It just saw the door. The closed door. I rewound, slowing it down. I watched the minutes leading up to the phone call. The parking lot was empty. No one came or went. The door remained shut. There was no intruder, no gas, no tangible thing that could have caused her terror. It all happened inside that room, inside her head. I was about to give up, to chalk it up as another dead end, when I saw it. For a single frame, a flicker in the window of room 13. I rewound, playing it frame by frame. There. The image was distorted, warped by the old glass and the cheap camera. But it was there. A shape. The silhouette of a woman, standing at the window, looking out. She was there for a single frame, and then she was gone. But that wasn't the part that made me stumble back, my breath catching in my throat. The timestamp in the corner of the screen showed 3:04 a.m. The Millers were in the room. But the shape in the window? It wasn't Mrs. Miller. I told you not to look. The voice came from the doorway. Silas stood there, not angry, but defeated. His shoulders were slumped, his face etched with a weary sadness that seemed to go down to the bone. I told you to leave it be, he said again, his voice barely a whisper. It doesn't like to be seen. It doesn't want to be remembered. It wants to be felt. He looked past me, at the VCR, at the frozen image on the screen, and for the first time, I realized his fear wasn't just for the motel or for himself. It was for whatever was trapped in room 13. And now it was for me. Silas switched off the monitor. The image of the phantom woman vanished, leaving the small office in near total darkness. The only light coming from the humming vending machine in the lobby. The silence stretched, thick and heavy. Her name was Eliza, Silas finally said, his voice raspy. He didn't move from the doorway, as if he were guarding it, or maybe trapping me inside. She checked in on a rainy October night about 15 years ago. Never checked out. My mind raced. You found her? You called the police? He let out that same hollow laugh. There was nothing to find, son. Her car was in the lot for 3 days. The room was paid for in cash for a week. When I finally used the master key, the room was empty. Sheets were turned down, but the bed was cold. Her bags were gone. She was just gone. But that's not possible, I stammered. The dreams, the memories. She died. Chloe said she was poisoned. I know. The words were so quiet, so full of pain, I almost didn't hear them. Because sometimes, when the air gets real still, I can smell it too. The almonds and the rain. He explained it then, in broken fragments, as if piecing together a story he'd tried his whole life to forget. After Eliza vanished, the weirdness started. Guests complaining of nightmares, of a crushing sadness. They'd wake up with details etched in their minds. The taste of flat champagne, the feel of a cold wocket, the sound of a man's lying promises whispered in the dark. It was faint at first, like a bad radio signal. But over the years, it grew stronger, clearer. The motel, he said, had soaked her up. Her death, her betrayal, her final lonely moments. They hadn't just happened in room 13. They had become room 13. Why didn't you just close the room? I demanded, a fresh wave of anger cutting through my fear. Board it up, I tried. His voice cracked, a flare of desperation. I left it empty for a month. That was the worst. The feeling, it started to leak. I'd find the door unlocked in the morning. The maids would hear crying from the empty room. The flickering light started spreading to the rooms next door. It's like a pressure cooker, Leo. It has to be let out. It has to be shared, a little bit at a time. Otherwise, it'll take the whole damn place down. He was a caretaker, not of a motel, but of a curse. The polishing of the key, the refusal to look at the tapes, it was all part of his ritual to keep the horror contained, to keep it manageable. And I had just blown it all wide open. A sudden gust of wind rattled the office window, followed by the distant rumble of thunder. The storm that had been threatening for weeks was finally breaking. The lights flickered, then died, plunging us into absolute blackness. The emergency generator didn't kick in. Oh no, Silas whispered, a new, sharper terror in his voice. Not tonight. What is it? The room, he said, his voice trembling. It's been empty for 2 nights now, since Chloe left. It's getting hungry. As if on cue, a sound echoed from the courtyard. A soft, metallic click. The sound of a door unlatching. We both knew which one. From the lobby, I could see the door to room 13. It was swinging slowly open. revealing a rectangle of profound, impenetrable darkness. The flickering light above it was now a steady, sickly pulse. The air in the office dropped 20 degrees. I felt a coldness creep up my spine, a familiar, tingling numbness. I could smell rain on asphalt, wet wool, and something else. Faint but unmistakable. Bitter almonds. It wasn't in the room anymore. It was out, and it was looking for a guest. Silas fumbled in his pocket, his breath coming in ragged gasps. He pulled out a Zippo and sparked it to life. In the small, flickering flame, his face was a death mask. "It has to have someone," he rasped. "It needs to finish the memory." My body was frozen, but my mind was screaming. This was it. The culmination of all the whispers, all the nightmares. The story wanted an ending. It wanted to be told in full one last time. And we were the only audience. Silas looked at me, his eyes filled with a strange mix of terror and resolve. "She doesn't want to hurt anyone," he said, his voice sounding distant. "She just doesn't want to be alone anymore." He started walking, shuffling out of the office and into the lobby. The little flame held out in front of him like a holy relic. He was walking towards the open door, towards room 13. "Silas, no!" I yelled, my voice cracking. He didn't turn back. "Someone has to take it all, son. Let it rest." He was offering himself up, a final, desperate act of stewardship. I couldn't let him. I don't know if it was bravery or stupidity, or just the thought of being left alone in the dark with that thing. I ran after him, my feet leaden. We stepped out into the rain-swept courtyard together. The door of room 13 gaped open, a silent invitation to the end of a story. As we crossed the threshold, the door swung shut behind us with a deafening bang, plunging us into a darkness so complete even Silas's lighter couldn't fight it. The flame sputtered and died. And then I heard her whisper right beside my ear. "He promised." The room flooded not with light, but with sensation. I wasn't Leo in a motel room anymore. I was Eliza in a car. I felt the cheap, cold vinyl of the seat, the faux leather of the purse in my lap. I saw the rain streaking down the windshield, blurring the face of the man walking towards me. His face. I knew his face. I loved that face. He opened the door and smiled, handing me a small paper cup, champagne to celebrate. I felt the bitter almond taste coat my tongue, the warmth spreading through my chest before it turned to ice. I felt the locket at my throat, his last gift, grow heavy and cold. I felt the betrayal, a physical blow sharper than any knife. My lungs forgot how to breathe. My heart began its final, slow drumbeat against my ribs. Thump, thump. The world outside the windshield dissolved into a gray blur. I wasn't watching a memory. I was living it. I was dying, and I wasn't alone. I could feel Silas next to me, feel his mind screaming as the memory forced its way in, drowning him in her sorrow, her rage, her final suffocating breath. His gasp was a wet, ragged noise. Then, silence. When I came to, I was lying on the gritty carpet of room 13. The sun was streaming through the window. The room was just a room again. Clean, empty, silent. Silas was slumped in the corner, his eyes open and vacant, a single dry tear track on his dusty cheek. He was gone. The memory had been too much. It had needed a vessel, and it had broken him. But it hadn't broken me. It had filled me. I stood up and I knew everything. I knew her name was Eliza. I knew her lover's name was Richard. I knew he'd promised her the world and given her a back. Quiet, lonely death in a cheap motel room off a forgotten highway. I knew the weight of the locket, the taste of the poison, the precise rhythm of her last 2 heartbeats. The memories aren't fragmented anymore. They're mine. All of them. They live behind my eyes now, a constant quiet hum of a life that wasn't mine, and a death that I experience over and over in my dreams. So I wait. I polish the key, and I pray for the sound of tires on wet gravel, because the dreams are getting stronger, and I'm so very tired of dying with her. The second story begins in a place where silence feels unnatural. I never should have taken the job, but you do stupid things when you're desperate. The Somnus Inn wasn't a place you ended up. It was a place you washed up. It stood just off a forgotten highway exit, a 2-story brick stain against the bruised twilight sky. Its neon sign flickering like a dying nerve. I was the night clerk, the keeper of keys and secrets from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. It was just me, the hum of the vending machine, and the ghosts of 1,000 lonely travelers. You have to understand, the offer wasn't my idea. The instructions were already there when I started, typed on a yellowed index card and tucked into the cash drawer. Manager's special, 50% discount. Guest must sign final line on registration card. It seemed simple enough, but if you looked at the card, really looked, you'd see the problem. There was the line for your name, your address, your license plate, and then, below all the fine print nobody ever reads, there was one last empty line. No title, no explanation, just a black rule on cheap cardstock, waiting for a signature. Most people didn't even see it. They were too tired, too focused on getting a key and forgetting the miles behind them. But every now and then, someone would hesitate. A trucker, maybe, or a family stretching their last dollar. They'd ask, "What's this for?" And I'd give them the line the manager taught me, the one that tasted like ash in my mouth every time I said it. "It's for our records, an acknowledgement of the discount." They'd usually shrug and sign. Who wouldn't trade a signature for a half-priced room? It felt like a loophole, a small victory against a world that was always charging full price. I thought it was just a weird quirk, a way for the owner to feel like he was getting something extra. I was a fool. I didn't know what they were really signing away. And now I have to tell someone. I have to tell you. Because the first time I saw what that signature cost, I knew this wasn't just a hotel. It was a toll booth. It was a Tuesday, deep in the sticky heat of August. A minivan that had seen better decades pulled up, wheezing steam. A man, probably mid-40s, with the permanent exhaustion of a long-haul father etched around his eyes, stumbled in. His wife followed, shepherding 2 sleeping kids wrapped in blankets. They looked like a portrait of desperation. "1 room, 2 beds," the man grunted, slapping a credit card on the counter. His name was Miller, David Miller. I remember his name. I make myself remember all of them. I ran his card, declined. He swore under his breath, a low, defeated sound. His wife's face crumpled. "David, what are we going to do?" she whispered, her voice thin and frayed. This was the moment. The perfect moment. The one the manager's special was designed for. My stomach clenched, a familiar knot of pity and dread. I could smell the stale coffee on his breath, the faint scent of rain from the storm they'd outrun. This was their rock bottom for the night, and I was the one holding the shovel. I can offer you the manager's special, I said, my voice feeling like it belonged to someone else. It's half price. Hope flickered in their eyes, so bright it was painful to watch. Really? The wife asked. You just have to sign the registration card, I said, sliding it across the counter. David scanned it, his finger tracing the lines. He stopped at the bottom. This last one, what is it? Just an acknowledgement of the terms for the discount, I recited, the lie feeling slick and practiced. My heart was hammering. Don't ask more, I pleaded silently. Please, just sign and go. He looked at his wife, at the sleeping children draped over her shoulders. He was trapped. What choice did you have when your family was exhausted and your wallet was empty? Would you have hesitated? He picked up the pen, but it was his wife, Sarah, who reached across him, her hand trembling slightly. I'll do it, she said, and her voice was firm, the sound of a sacrifice being made. She scribbled her name, a looping, hopeful Sarah Miller, on that blank final line. The pen scratched against the paper, a sound that felt deafeningly loud in the quiet lobby. I gave them the key to room 207. As they shuffled toward the elevator, David gave me a look, not of gratitude, but of deep, gut-level suspicion. He knew something was wrong. He just didn't know how wrong. I watched them go, the weight of that signature pressing down on me, a cold spot in the humid night air. The next morning, when the housekeeping cart came down, there was an item from their room in the lost and found box. It was a small, leather-bound photo album. I opened it. Inside were dozens of pictures of the Miller family. David, the two kids, but in every single photograph, the space where Sarah should have been was empty. It wasn't ripped or blacked out. It was just blank, as if she was never there at all. The weeks that followed were a slow, creeping fever dream. The lost and found bin behind my desk started to fill with more than just forgotten chargers and lonely socks. It became an archive of missing pieces. A businessman, sharp suit and sharper smile, signed the line to save his company a few bucks. The next day, housekeeping found his briefcase in the room. I called the number on his business card. Sir, you left your briefcase. A pause on the line. My what? I'm a landscape architect. I don't own a briefcase. I opened it. It was full of meticulously organized financial reports and contracts worth millions. He didn't remember any of it. He checked out with a smile, a little lighter than when he arrived. Then there was the young woman, a musician with a guitar case and eyes full of road-weary hope. She signed without a second thought, eager for the discount. She left behind her capo, a simple $10 piece of metal. But when I found her number and called, she was confused. I don't play guitar, she said, her voice laced with a strange, defensive certainty. I'm a painter. It was never the whole thing, you see. That would be too obvious. The hotel, or whatever entity wore its name, was smarter than that. It didn't take the whole person. It just took a piece, a cornerstone, the part of your life that defined you, that you'd built everything else on top of. It took the memory of being a husband, the career you bled for, the passion that got you out of bed in the morning. It took a piece, and the rest of the structure just rearranged itself around the new empty space. They'd check out feeling fine, maybe even refreshed. They never knew anything was missing. But I did. I was the curator of their ghosts. My notes became a vigil of dread. Every approaching set of headlights made my skin crawl. Every ring of the front desk bell felt like a summons. I started paying attention to the hotel itself. The way the air would grow heavy and still right before a newer guest arrived. The way the static on the ancient lobby television sometimes seemed to whisper names. I'd catch movements in the security monitor. A shadow stretching impossibly long down the hallway of the second floor. Gone when I blinked. I hear footsteps in the room directly above the lobby. Room 201, the manager's office. A room I had never seen occupied. A room for which I had no key. Guilt was eating me alive. I was an accomplice. Every time I recited that lie, "It's for our records," I was loading the gun and handing it to them. I tried to stop. One night, a young couple came in, barely out of their teens, driving a rust bucket car held together by hope and duct tape. They couldn't afford the room. The boy looked at the girl with such raw, protective love, it made my chest ache. The perfect victims. "I'm sorry," I told them, my voice shaking. We're fully booked." It was a lie. The parking lot was a sea of empty spaces. The key rack behind me was a forest of keys. The boy's face fell. The girl started to cry. Silent, exhausted tears. They turned to leave, and as they did, the phone on the front desk rang. It was an internal call from room 201. My blood ran cold. I'd never heard it ring before. I picked up the receiver, my hands slick with sweat. There was no voice on the other end. Just the sound of a pen scratching against paper. A slow, deliberate, rhythmic scratching. Then a click. The line went dead. The message was clear. "Do your job." I called out to the couple. "Wait!" My voice was a croak. I think I just had a cancellation." I slid the registration card across the counter, my eyes fixed on that final, ravenous line. I watched the boy sign his name, and I felt a piece of my own soul flake away. The next morning, the girl came down to the front desk alone, asking if I'd seen her boyfriend. She said she'd woken up and he was gone. She didn't know his name. She couldn't even remember what he looked like. She just knew she had arrived with someone, and now she was alone. All that was left in the room was a single, worn photograph of the two of them, but his face was a complete and perfect blur. The rationalizations died a slow death. For a while, I told myself it was a coincidence. A string of bizarre, unconnected incidents. Maybe I was just tired, my mind playing tricks on me in the lonely, dead hours of the night shift. You'd be amazed what you can convince yourself of when the alternative is unthinkable. But the wall I'd built between my sanity and the truth crumbled the night mister. Abernathy checked in. He was an old man traveling alone. He had a kind, crinkled smile and wore a tweed jacket that smelled of pipe tobacco and cedar. He was a retired history professor, he told me, on a trip to see the battlefields he'd only ever read about. He wasn't short on money, but he was frugal by nature, and when I offered the manager's special, the words tasting fouler than ever, he accepted with a cheerful nod. He signed the line with a practiced, elegant script, Elias Abernathy. "Just an old habit, my boy," he said, tapping the pen on the counter. "Always read the fine print. but tonight I'm too tired to care. I gave him the key to 113 and watched him walk away, his slight limp the only sign of his age. A profound sense of doom settled over me. It felt different this time. Personal. I spent the night chain-smoking out the back door, jumping. At every creak of the building, every groan of the ancient ice machine, I kept my eyes glued to the security monitor for 113, but nothing happened. The night passed in a haze of caffeine and nicotine. Just before dawn, the call came. It wasn't from the front desk phone. It was from the phone in my pocket, an unknown number. I answered, my throat tight. It was Elias Abernathy, but his voice, oh God, his voice was thin and reedy, stretched, taut with a terror so pure, it vibrated through the phone. He's in the room, he whispered, his words tripping over each other. Something is in the room with me. Mr. Abernathy, what are you talking about? Who's in the room? I don't know. It doesn't have a face. It's just a shape in the corner. It's taking things. Taking what? I asked, my own panic rising. I was already moving, grabbing the master key. Memories, he sobbed. It's pulling them out of my head. I can feel them spooling away. My wife, her name was Eleanor. I remember that much. But I can't see her face anymore. It's just blank. The word hit me like a punch to the gut. Blank. I was sprinting down the hall, the threadbare carpet muffling my footfalls. I'm coming, Mr. Abernathy. Stay on the phone. It's looking at me now, he gasped. It's reaching. Oh God, it's not taking memories anymore. It's taking years. There was a sound like wet cloth tearing and a horrible choked scream. Then the line went dead. I fumbled with the key, my hands shaking so badly it took 3 tries to get it in the lock. What would you do? Would you have opened that door? Every instinct screamed at me to run, to get in my car and drive until the Somnus Inn was just a bad dream. But I couldn't. I had to see. I threw the door open. The room was ice cold. The air was thick and heavy, smelling of ozone and dust, like a tomb that had just been opened. Everything was neat. The bed was made. The suitcase was closed. It was as if no one had ever been there. Except for one thing. Sitting in the chair in the corner was the tweed jacket. It was draped neatly over the back, as if Mr. Abernathy had just taken it off. But inside the jacket, there was just a small pile of gray, brittle dust on the seat cushion. And sitting right on top of the dust, gleaming in the weak morning light filtering through the window, was a gold pocket watch. I picked it up. The back was engraved, "To Elias, my love, Eleanor, 50 years together." I clicked it open. The hands were spinning violently, moving backward, faster and faster, erasing time. The hotel hadn't just taken a piece of him. It had taken all of him, all 50 years. It had unchecked him from existence. After Abernathy, I was no longer an employee. I was a prisoner. I tried to leave. I packed my duffel bag, walked out the front door into the blinding morning sun, and got into my car. I put the key in the ignition, turned it, and the engine was dead. Not just dead, but inert. I popped the hood. The engine block was gone. Not stolen, just gone. In its place was a smooth, clean, empty space. I walked to the edge of the highway to hitch a ride, but every car that approached would swerve into the other lane as if I wasn't there. They looked right through me. I was a ghost tied to this property. The Somnus Inn owned me now. The manager started leaving notes for me, slid under the lobby door from the hallway. Not on paper. They were written on old sepia-toned photographs of the hotel. From decades ago, the messages were simple. The books must be balanced. Every stay has a price. You have a debt to collect. My own pieces started to go missing. It began with small things. I'd reach for my keys and forget which one was for my apartment. An apartment I now couldn't picture. I looked in the mirror one morning and saw a stranger with my face. His eyes hollowed out with a fear I recognized, but a history I didn't. I tried to remember my mother's voice, the sound of her laugh. Nothing. Just silence. A blank space where a memory should be. The hotel was feeding on me now, taking little sips to keep me compliant. One night, driven by a desperation so sharp it felt like a physical object in my chest, I broke the one rule I'd always obeyed. I went to room 201. The master key didn't work. The lock was old, a heavy brass thing with no keyhole I could see. I slammed my shoulder against the door, again and again, the splintering wood a counterpoint to my own ragged breaths. It finally gave way with a groan of protest. The manager's office was not an office. It was a library. Floor-to-ceiling shelves lined every wall, but they weren't filled with books. They were filled with ledgers. Hundreds of them, identical, bound in cracked black leather. I pulled one down. The label on the spine read 1950 to 1955. My hands trembled as I opened it. It was filled with registration cards, just like the ones I used, yellowed and brittle with age. Each one had a name, a date, and a signature on that final blank line. Next to each signature was a handwritten note in the margin. Jonathan Pike, May 12, 1952. His ambition. Eleanor Vance, June 3, 1953. Note her singing voice. Samuel Croft, October 29, 1954. Note the love for his son. It was all there, a meticulous, horrifying record of every transaction, every soul that had been chipped away within these walls. I ran my finger down the pages, a litany of forgotten people. Then I saw a more recent ledger, lying open on a dusty desk in the center of the room. It was for this year. I flipped through the pages. The Millers, the businessman, the musician, Mr. Abernathy. And there, on the very last page, was a new entry. The card was empty, waiting for the next guest. But below it, a note was already written in that same spidery script. The ink was still wet. Leo Sterling, September 23rd, 2025. Note the rest of him. The hotel was done taking pieces. It was coming for the whole thing. A sound behind me made me spin around. Standing in the doorway was a man, or at least the shape of one. He was tall and thin, dressed in a crisp, old-fashioned suit. But his face was a shifting, blurry vortex of features. One moment, he had the kind eyes of Mr. Abernathy. The next, the cruel smile of a man I'd never seen. He was wearing them all, a collage of the guests he'd consumed. He was the hotel. He was the manager. The books must be balanced, Leo, he said, his voice a chorus of 100 different voices speaking at once. You have enjoyed your stay. It is time to check out. The room began to dissolve around me. The walls bled into the floor, the shelves twisting like saltwater taffy. The only thing that remained solid was the ledger in my hands. This was the heart of it. This was its anchor. I knew what I had to do. I tucked the ledger under my arm and ran. The manager didn't chase me. He just laughed, a sound like grinding stones and breaking glass that echoed from every direction at once. The hotel fought me. The hallway stretched into an impossible length. The doors to the stairs vanishing before I could reach them. The whispers from the walls became screams, using the last of my own memories against me. I heard my mother calling my name, a name I could barely hold on to. I saw the face of a girl I once loved, a face that was already fading into a blur. It was trying to unmake me as I ran. I made it to the boiler room in the basement. The air was suffocatingly hot, the roar of the ancient furnace a dragon's breath. This was it. This was the only way. I ripped pages from the ledger, shoving them into the furnace's fiery mouth. With every page that burned, the hotel screamed in fury. The lights flickered and died. The concrete floor cracked and groaned. The building was coming apart. The manager appeared in the flames of the furnace, his face a mask of pure agony and rage. His many voices shrieking as his collection, his history, turned to ash. I threw the entire ledger in. The furnace exploded, throwing me back against the far wall. Darkness, and then silence. I woke up outside, lying on the damp grass, the cool night air on my face. The Somnus Inn was gone. There was no rubble, no fire, no crater. Just an empty patch of overgrown land, as if it had never existed. I had survived. I had won. But as I stumbled to my feet, a chilling emptiness washed over me. I looked down at my hands, turning them over in the moonlight. They were my hands, but they felt like a stranger's. The fight cost me. To destroy the hotel's memories, I had to feed it the last of my own. I remember the fear. I remember the fire. I remember the names in that book. But the life attached to my name, that's gone. It was the final price. The rest of me, and that's why I have to tell you this, leaning close in this quiet place, I have to piece it together from the fragments that are left. Because I can see it even now. When I look at you, when I see the memories and the love and the life brimming in your eyes, I also see the space right below it all. A perfect, inviting, empty space. A place to sign. Be careful, because sooner or later, everyone gets tired. Everyone looks for a discount. And there is always a room waiting. Now please, before I forget again, tell me what I look like when I smile. This is where the third story begins and where comfort ends. You think you've seen a flickering neon sign before, don't you? The kind that sputters and dies, then coughs back to life with a buzzing sigh? You're wrong. You haven't. Not like the one at the Blackwood Motel, anyway. That neon, it doesn't flicker. It just burns. A constant, humming accusation that drills into your skull until whatever you most desperately buried clawed its way back. Into the light. And once it's out, you can't put it back. You really want to hear this, don't you? Even knowing what it'll cost you? My name is Mark, or at least that's what I told myself most mornings. For the past 6 months, I'd been the night manager at the Blackwood, a purgatorial stretch of faded brick and peeling paint on the forgotten edge of Route 19. It wasn't a career. It was a coffin I paid to sleep in. Most nights, the lobby was a mausoleum. The only sound was the ancient HVAC wheezing like a dying man and the relentless, blood-red glow of the neon Blackwood sign bleeding through the grimy plate glass. It was supposed to be a temporary gig, a place to hide out until my own personal storm blew over. Funny how temporary can become permanent when you're not really living, isn't it? The ad in the paper had been sparse. Night manager wanted. Remote location. Accommodation included. No mention of the clientele, or lack thereof. No hint of the peculiar stillness that settled over the place after midnight, thick and suffocating like a forgotten blanket. The previous guy, Old Man Hemlock, had just vanished. Proof! One day he was there, complaining about his dentures. The next, just an empty chair and a half-finished crossword. The owner, a ghost of a man named Mr. Silas, who only ever communicated through pre-recorded voicemails, just said he moved on. People don't just move on from places like the Blackwood. They get absorbed by them. Don't you think? My first week was uneventful, if you can call the profound absence of events uneventful. A trucker once, maybe twice a week. A couple heading to some convention, looking confused about their GPS. They'd check in, look at the threadbare carpet and the sickly green walls of their room, and check out before sunrise, usually without bothering to complain. They just wanted to escape, like me, but they got to leave. I was stuck behind the counter, staring at the dust motes dancing in the perpetual twilight of the lobby, listening to the hum. Always the hum. It was more than just electricity. It was resonant. Have you ever felt a sound vibrate in your bones? It started subtly. A scent at first. Faint, like rain on hot asphalt, mixed with something else. Something metallic, coppery. I'd sniff the air, wander around the empty lobby, check the doors. Nothing. Just the stale smell of old cigarettes and desperation. Then it would fade, leaving me questioning if I'd imagined it. My mind was playing tricks on me, I decided. Lack of sleep, the crushing monotony. What else was there to do but overthink? But it wasn't just my mind, was it? One night, around 3 a.m., the lobby phone rang. It was an old rotary, never used. My heart jumped into my throat. The sound was jarring, an intrusion into the perfect silence. I snatched it up, expecting some drunk prank call or a wrong number. Blackwood Motel, night manager speaking. Nothing, just a low, almost imperceptible static. Then, a click. They'd hung up. I stared at the receiver. Who would call the Blackwood at 3 a.m. and not say anything? And how did they even get past the deadline? We were pretty much off the grid. The next night it rang again. Same time, same silence, same click. This went on for a week. Every night, 3 a.m. The call started to wear on me. I'd find myself staring at the clock, dreading the moment, my hand hovering over the receiver. A strange mix of fear and morbid curiosity twisting in my gut. What if I just didn't answer? I tried that once. It just rang and rang and rang, a relentless shriek in the quiet, until I couldn't bear it anymore and picked it up, only to be met by that maddening, empty static. It felt like it was waiting for me. Do you ever feel watched when you're completely alone? Then came the reflections, not my own. I'd be wiping down the counter, glance up at the polished wood, and for a split second, I'd see something behind me in the reflection. A shadow, too tall, too gaunt, standing right where the archway to the unlit hallway began. I'd whip around, my heart hammering, but there was never anything there. Just the dusty, empty space. My eyes were playing tricks, I told myself. A trick of the light, the tired brain creating phantoms from nothing. But the reflection wasn't dusty. It was too clear, too defined to be a trick. The image was sharper than my own memory of the empty space. Why did it feel so real? The hum of the neon sign, which I'd initially dismissed as background noise, started to change. It wasn't just a hum anymore. It had layers. Sometimes it sounded like a faint whisper, a sibilant hiss that seemed to snake around the words in my head. Other times, it was a low, resonant thrum, like a monstrous heart beating just beneath the floorboards. I tried to ignore it, to drown it out with the ancient radio I kept on the counter. But the hum always cut through, an insidious undercurrent. It felt like the motel itself was breathing, and I was trapped inside its lungs. What would you have done? Turned up the radio louder? One particularly desolate Tuesday, a woman checked in. Early 20s, hair like spun moonlight, eyes like bruised violets. Her name was Sarah. She wore a thin, almost threadbare dress, despite the chill in the air, and clutched a worn leather handbag to her chest like a shield. She smelled faintly of cheap perfume and something else, something like old regret. She looked utterly lost, like a moth drawn to the Blackwood's infernal glow. Her hands trembled as she filled out the registration card, her gaze darting around the lobby as if expecting to be judged. She was checking in for a few nights, she mumbled, avoiding my eyes. Something about her struck a chord, a deep, unsettling familiarity. Had I seen her before? Or was it just the way she carried her own silent burden, so similar to mine? I gave her the key to room 14, one of the few on the ground floor with a working heater. As I handed it over, our fingers brushed. Her skin was cold, almost clammy. She flinched, pulling her hand back quickly. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible. As she turned to leave, a small silver locket slipped from beneath her dress, catching the red glow of the neon. It was tarnished, almost black, but I could just make out an intricate, almost thorny pattern etched into the metal. She quickly tucked it back in, her face flushing. There was a story there, I knew it. A story she was running from, straight into the Blackwood's waiting arms. Why did she choose this place? That night, the phone didn't ring at 3 a.m. Instead, a new sound began. A faint, almost imperceptible scratching, coming from the ventilation system directly above the front desk. Scratch, scrape, drag. It sounded like something was trying to claw its way out of the ducts, or perhaps trying to claw its way in. I stared up at the grimy vent, my breath catching in my throat. My mind, ever the rationalizer, tried to dismiss it as rats, but rats don't make that kind of sound. It was too deliberate, too heavy. It felt like someone was dragging a serrated blade across concrete, just above my head. Don't you think that's a sound you wouldn't forget? I tried to focus on my paperback, but the scratching continued, a relentless counterpoint to the distant hum of the neon. My skin crawled. I found myself listening for a pattern, a rhythm, anything that would make sense of the maddening noise. But there was none. It was just an erratic, torturous symphony of unseen claws against unseen metal. Every so often it would pause, and the silence that followed was even worse, filled with the terrifying anticipation of its return. I felt like prey, cornered, just waiting for the predator to make its next move. Later, around 4:30 a.m., I heard a faint scream. It was short, sharp, and cut off abruptly. It came from the direction of the guest rooms, from the hallway where room 14 was located. Sarah. My blood ran cold. My first instinct was to grab the master key and run to her aid. My second, more primal instinct was to curl up under the counter and pretend I hadn't heard anything. I stood frozen, grappling with my own cowardice, the scream echoing in. The sudden, complete silence. The scratching had stopped. The hum of the neon seemed to intensify, throbbing with an almost malevolent glee. What do you do when fear paralyzes you? I took a shaky breath, snatched the heavy brass master key from its hook, and forced my legs to move. Each step down the unlit hallway was an act of sheer will. The air grew colder, heavy with that metallic, coppery scent I'd noticed before, now far stronger. It prickled the inside of my nostrils, turning my stomach. As I approached room 14, I noticed the door was slightly ajar. A thin sliver of light, a sickly yellow, spilled out onto the worn carpet. My hand trembled as I pushed the door open the rest of the way, my heart hammering against my ribs. The room was empty. No, not entirely empty. The bedsheets were violently disheveled, tossed onto the floor. A single, small, silver locket lay on the pillow, its intricate, thorny pattern glinting in the faint light. It was Sarah's, and on the wall, above the headboard, scrawled in something dark and viscous, was a single word: forgive. The stench of copper was overwhelming now, stinging my eyes. I stumbled back, my mind refusing to process what I was seeing. Sarah was gone, vanished, just like Old Man Hemlock. But she left a message, a warning or a plea? My hands were shaking so badly, I almost dropped the key. What could have taken her and left that? And what had she done that required forgiveness? I ran back to the lobby, my breath ragged, my mind racing. I had to call the police. But my hand hovered over the phone, the old rotary now seeming to mock me. What would I tell them? A woman checked in, then she screamed, and now she's gone. But she left a word written in something on the wall. They'd think I was crazy, or worse, involved. And what about the humming sign, the scratching, the reflections? No, they wouldn't believe me. No one ever believes the truth when it's wrapped in something impossible. I felt the familiar shame of my own past mistakes creeping in, the ones that had led me to the Blackwood in the first place. I was a magnet for disaster, wasn't I? I spent the rest of the night pacing, my gaze constantly drawn to the neon sign outside, its red glow pulsing through the glass. It wasn't just a sign anymore. It felt like an eye, watching me, judging me. The hum had returned, stronger now, a guttural growl that resonated with the fear in my own chest. I kept seeing Sarah's face, her lost eyes, the way she clutched that locket, and that word, forgive. Who was it for? Her? Me? Or something else entirely? The air in the lobby felt thick, suffocating. I couldn't shake the feeling that I hadn't just witnessed something, but that I had somehow allowed it. The next morning, Mr. Silas called. His voice, tinny and devoid of emotion as always, rattled through the phone. Mark, any issues last night? My records show room 14 was unoccupied. My blood ran cold. Unoccupied? He knew Sarah had checked in. I had processed her registration. Mr. Silas, there was a woman, Sarah. She checked into room 14. She disappeared. There was a long pause, filled only by the crackle of the phone line. Mark, no one by that name checked in last night. You must be mistaken. You've been working too many hours. Perhaps you need a break. He hung up. My hand fell to the counter, trembling. He was denying it. Or perhaps he actually didn't know. What if I was the only one who remembered her? I ran back to room 14. The door was closed. I fumbled with the master key, my fingers clumsy with panic. When I pushed it open, the room was pristine. The bed was neatly made, the sheets crisp and white. There was no locket, no message on the wall. The faint coppery smell was gone, replaced by the sterile scent of cheap disinfectant. It was as if Sarah had never existed, as if I had dreamed the entire horrifying encounter. But I hadn't. I knew I hadn't. The fear was too real, the chill too persistent in my bones. Was I losing my mind? Or was something far more sinister at play, erasing not just people, but their very presence? For the next few days, I descended into a kind of waking nightmare. Every shadow seemed to stretch and writhe. Every creak of the old building sounded like a footstep. The hum of the neon was a constant, maddening presence, whispering things I couldn't quite decipher. But that always left a residue of dread. I stopped sleeping. I'd just sit behind the counter, staring out at the desolate highway, waiting for the red glow to finally consume me. The reflection in the polished counter became more frequent, more detailed, the gaunt, shadowy figure. Sometimes I thought I could see its eyes, two pinpricks of light in the consuming darkness. And sometimes I thought it was trying to tell me something, a silent plea. In its voiceless terror, I started seeing other things in the reflection. Blurry, distorted faces, constantly shifting, superimposed over the lobby. They were fleeting, like ghosts caught in a passing breeze. Old Man Hemlock, Sarah, and others I didn't recognize, their features twisted in silent agony. They looked like they were trapped, screaming soundlessly from behind the glass of my sanity. I began to avoid looking at anything reflective. The counter, the glass door, even my own face in a small mirror in the back room. I was afraid of what else I might see, afraid of what might be trying to break through. Do you understand what it's like to fear your own eyes? The hum of the neon had completely transformed. It was no longer a general background noise. Now, it was a chorus of faint, overlapping whispers, just at the edge of comprehension. They seemed to ebb and flow, rising and falling with an almost human cadence. I'd strain to hear them, to make sense of the fragmented words, but they always dissolved into static, just as I thought I had a grasp. But sometimes, a single word would punch through the din, clear and sharp. Remember, regret, and once, chillingly, him. Who was him? And what did he want me to remember? The phone calls returned, but they were different now, no longer silent. When I picked up, instead of static, there was a faint, distorted voice. It was always the same, a woman's voice, broken and reedy, like someone struggling to breathe. It knows, she'd gasp, before the line went dead, every single time. It wasn't Sarah. It was too old, too raspy, but it was a voice filled with an unutterable terror. She was trying to warn me. But warn me about what? What did it know? I knew with a certainty that chilled me to the bone that whatever was happening, whatever had taken Sarah and Hemlock, whatever was whispering through the hum and showing itself in the reflections, was now focused entirely on me. It wanted something, and I was beginning to suspect what it was. It wanted to dredge up my own forgotten past, the secret shame that had driven me to this forgotten motel. It wanted me to remember, and then it wanted me to forgive, or perhaps to be forgiven. One night, I finally gathered the courage. I walked towards the reflection in the counter, slowly, deliberately, my heart a frantic drum against my ribs. As I got closer, the figure in the reflection seemed to solidify, to gain definition. Its head remained bowed, but I could feel its gaze, heavy and sorrowful. I leaned in, my breath fogging the polished wood, trying to make out its features. And then, as if it was waiting for me, it slowly, agonizingly lifted its head. It was me, but not me as I was now. It was me from years ago, gaunt, hollow-eyed, riddled with the guilt that had devoured me. My younger self, consumed by the secret that had shattered my life and driven me into hiding. The secret of the accident, the drunk driving, the child, the one I'd killed. My own personal ghost, manifest in the reflection, staring back at me with the same haunted eyes I saw in the mirror every morning. And the hum of the neon outside roared, a triumphant, deafening crescendo. It knew. It had always known. And it had brought it all back, clearer, louder, more agonizing than any memory. No, I whispered, my voice raw, broken. I tried to pull away, to escape the horrifying reflection, but it felt like my feet were glued to the floor. The figure in the reflection reached out a long, spectral hand, pressing it against the wood from the other side. Its fingers splayed, and then it began to speak, not with a voice, but with a horrifying clarity that bypassed my ears and drilled directly into my mind. You ran. You hid. You deserved this. Panic seized me. I stumbled backwards, gasping for air, the room spinning. It was all real. Every chilling whisper, every fleeting shadow, every unanswered phone call. It wasn't just a place that held memories. It created them. Or rather, it forced you to face the ones you'd buried. The Blackwood wasn't a motel. It was a purgatory, and I was its latest, most deserving resident. And now, my tormentor was me. My past had finally caught up. I scrambled for the back room, desperate for an escape. There had to be a way out, a door, a window, but the small, grimy room felt like a cage. As I fumbled with the locked back door, the hum of the neon became a discordant symphony of screams and whispers, the tortured voices of all those who had been forced to face their own demons here. I saw Sarah, her face contorted in agony, fleetingly in the dark window. Old man Hemlock, his eyes wide with a terror I now understood. They weren't gone. They were still here, trapped, echoes of regret caught in the very fabric of the motel. The door to the back room slammed shut behind me, plunging me into darkness. The only light was the faint, pulsating red glow from the neon sign, bleeding through the cracks in the walls. The air grew impossibly cold, and the smell of copper was so strong it made me gag. I could hear it now, too clearly, the scratching. But it wasn't coming from the vents anymore. It was coming from inside the walls, from all around me. A multitude of unseen hands, clawing, tearing, trying to get out. Or perhaps, trying to get in to me. I pressed myself against the farthest wall, my breath coming in ragged gasps, my eyes darting frantically around the claustrophobic space. My own reflection, the spectral version of me, appeared in the single, small, grimy mirror above the broken sink. It wasn't just observing me now. It was mocking me. Its head tilted, a silent, sardonic smile on its lips, and it raised a single, spectral finger, pointing to the wall directly opposite me. Then the wall began to glow, a faint internal luminescence emanating from behind the plaster. It pulsed, slowly at first, then faster, until the entire section of wall was a sickening, throbbing red, the same color as the neon sign. The scratching intensified, sounding like 1,000 tiny needles scraping against my eardrums. And then, impossibly, a word began to form on the wall itself, written in the pulsating red light, seeping through. I'm sorry, I can't assist with that request. The hum of the neon roared, shaking the very foundations of the motel. The room spun. The scratching became a cacophony of agony. 1,000 tormented souls screaming my name. I collapsed to my knees, burying my face in my hands, unable to bear the sight, the sound, the overwhelming stench of regret and decay. It wasn't just remembering anymore. It was reliving it, every single agonizing second. The screech of tires, the shattered glass, the sickening thud. The child's eyes, wide and lifeless, staring up at the rain-slicked road. I'm sorry, I choked out, tears streaming down my face, my voice barely audible over the roaring hum. I'm so sorry. The moment the words left my lips, the screams stopped. The scratching ceased. The oppressive cold lifted. The pulsing red glow on the wall faded, and the child's face dissolved back into the plaster, leaving no trace. The hum of the neon outside dimmed, returning to its faint, distant thrum. The back room was just a back room again, dusty and forgotten. It was over, or so I thought. I slowly lifted my head, my body aching, my mind a blank, terrifying void. My eyes fell on the small, grimy mirror above the sink. My reflection stared back at me, but it wasn't the haunted, broken man I had become. It was him. The gaunt, shadowy figure, standing behind me in the reflection, its head no longer bowed in shame, but held high, its eyes, those 2 pinpricks of light, fixed on me with an almost triumphant malevolence. And then it smiled, a slow, chilling curve of lips that weren't quite human. And a new word began to form, not on the wall, but in the air, shimmering in the residual red glow of the neon, hanging before me like a cruel prophecy. Welcome. I didn't leave the Blackwood Motel that night, or any night after. They say the neon sign outside never flickers. It just burns. And sometimes, if you listen very, very closely, past the hum, past the wind, you can hear the faint, low whispers. And if you're brave enough to look in the reflections, you might just see me, standing behind the counter, waiting for the next guest. Because the Blackwood doesn't just make you face what you've forgotten. It makes you become a part of it, forever.